Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely, I'm with you always to the very end of the age. This is the last week of the sermon series. Next week, Rich will be bringing our message from the series that he's been doing called Am I My Brother's Keeper? I'm going to check out a worship service. When they say dismiss the kids next week. Oh my gosh, your kids are so trouble because I get to go get the kids next week. And I have something very, very, very different, unusual, and special planned for the kids next week. So, if you have kids, bring them next week. They get to hang out with me, okay? They'll enjoy it. And if not, they'll learn something out of it. But for today, we have to finish this series. And for that to be finished, we have to deal with that very last verb that Jesus gave in the Great Commission. And the word is teach. And when you read through the book that kind of spawned this sermon series and gave birth to the next one also, the book is called Future Church. The author gives us two very good analogies that he wants us to consider when we think about the word teach. And the first is the story of a man that loved to play tennis. And he is very, very good at it. As a matter of fact, he can beat just about all of his friends as he goes out and plays tennis with on the weekend. He is definitely a weekend warrior when it comes to tennis. However, this man decides, I want to be the best tennis player I can possibly be. I guess he had a lot of money because he went out and he hired himself a coach to teach him how to be a better tennis player. Upon meeting the coach asked him a very important question. What is your goal in taking these lessons? You're looking for a goal? He said, yes. Do you merely want to improve your game, or do you want to learn how to play tennis? Now, this puzzled the man greatly because he'd been playing tennis for most of his life. He knew the rules. He knew how to do a backstroke and a front stroke and overhand. He could do all of these things. So what do you mean? What does it mean to learn to play tennis? And then the coach explained. If all you want to do is improve your game, then what I'll do is I'll sit back and I'll watch what you do and I'll tell you how to make it better. We'll just make a few tweaks here and there. But quite honestly, if you want to learn how to play tennis, then you know what? You're going to have to unlearn everything that you've learned. You're going to have to take that game that you think you play so well and set it to the side because guess what? You're going to have to learn how to do everything the way that I tell you to do it. And the story struck a nerve with me because I'm a church rat. Okay? By that term, I mean that I've been doing this church thing a long time. And as I look out, guess what? There are people that are sitting here today, and you've been doing this a lot longer than me. And a lot of times when we start thinking about this term obey, when we start thinking about this word teach, what we think is, I just need you to tweak a little bit. I just need you to help me fix my game. You know, my stroke may not be as smooth as it needs to be. So kind of help me with that. Or maybe I just don't run from side to side as well as I used to. So help me with that. We just want a few tweaks. But that's not what Jesus came to do. Jesus literally said, hey, guess what? In this disciple-making commission, you have to realize you may be playing the game that you taught yourself, not the game that Jesus calls you to play. Hold that thought for a moment. Let's talk about the second story. And this is one I have nothing in common with, okay? I don't own a dog. I've never owned a dog. I've never trained a dog. I'm not really a dog fan unless it comes from a bun with some coleslaw. I am not what you would call a dog fan, okay? However, in the story, I did get this because there was a man. I don't know why I get man. I guess it could be a woman, but there he eventually got to the point that he thought he had taught everything he could to dogs. So, like our tennis player, he thought, I'm going to go hire myself a professional dog trainer. So he takes the dog to the dog trainer, and he brings the dog out, and he proceeds to show the trainer all the wonderful things that he had taught this dog. And when he was all done, the trainer looked at the man and said, we have a lot of work. This again confused the man. I mean, his dog could do so many things. And the man looked at the guy, the trainer looked at the man and said, here's the thing, guy. You have taught your dog to do tricks. I'm going to teach your dog to do things. And I got thinking about this statement, and I have to ask, is this what we're doing in church? After all, we've taught you to come. We've taught you to sit. We've taught you to stay. We've taught you to speak. We call that singing and worship. We've even taught you to play fetch. Go get me somebody else and bring them here. But those are all just tricks, correct? Have we really taught you to obey? Do we really understand obey? Because after all, when we do the trick correctly, we look at our people and say, who's a good doggy? Who's a good doggy? But when our people don't do the trick, we say, bad Christian. That's not the way we're supposed to do it. You're laughing, but guess what? It's just not what we did. So I guess today we're going to have to come to a conclusion of what is the goal of teaching. And it isn't to teach your trick. And it isn't to improve your game. The goal of teaching is obedience. I'm in Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 19. If you want to turn that way, but I'm only going to be here for a few moments, so I'll probably be gone before you get there. Just hang tight with me here. Do not think, this is Jesus talking, do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. But truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, this particular passage is actually from what we call the Sermon on the Mount. We are very, 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 very early in Jesus' teaching. And he comes up and he makes it very clear. I, Jesus, have not come to do away with the law. Now, the law he was talking about was the law of Moses, all of the rules and regulations and all of the things that God had given Moses that the Jews have been doing for thousands upon thousands of years. Jesus saying, I am not coming to do away with that. In fact, I'm coming to fulfill it. In fact, when it comes to the law, I'm about to raise the bar just a notch. You see, because you think that the law and teaching the law is about knowing the law. I'm here to help you understand that it's about obeying the law. And you see, this is the obedience factor. It goes beyond just improving our game. And it goes well beyond just teaching us tricks. We don't provide just information. It comes with application. In other words, putting teaching into action. Does it really matter that I can quote 50,000 different Bible verses if I can't put anything into action? If all I do is quote them and then I go outside this building and nobody can see it in my life, am I really obeying? Or did I just learn another trick? A few more verses to stick in. Now, you have to understand that this particular thing of application is coupled with the idea of two words that we do not like. Accountability and responsibility. To use the information in our lives to be more like Christ. Therefore, in our obedience model, not only do I learn it, not only do I apply it, that means that we, the church, are supposed to be looking at one another, and when it is not being applied correctly, we have a responsibility to hold one another accountable. That sounds like a bunch of nosy busybodies messing in my business. That's what this is about. you understand this is obedience, and if you're going to be obedient, then you do have to be held accountable for when you are not. Let's be honest. They put all the speed limit signs they want out there on the interstate, but you knew there were no police officers. How many people would actually follow the speed limit? Okay, I got one person that raised their hand. You're a better person than mine, because I can't raise it. You know what? Because why? We want to get there as fast as we can, and we think, we got this, right? So we wouldn't pay attention to it. So there's the idea of accountability and responsibility, but in the church, remembering the accountability and responsibility must be wrapped in mercy and grace when obedience is not achieved. Therefore, there are going to be those times in my life that even though I know it, even though I'm trying my hardest to apply it, even though I know I need to be responsible and I'm going to be held accountable, there's just going to be times, like the song was saying earlier, we're going to fall flat on our face. And yes, I need to be held accountable. But wrapped around that accountability is this concept of mercy and grace. We don't run over the sheep. We try to heal the sheep and get it back up. We don't discard the lambs because they won't listen. Sometimes we have to work a little harder to keep them close. There is this idea that we must grasp hold of it. But even in mercy and grace, that we cannot ignore obedience to God's command. So that means even though I'm going to show you mercy, even though I'm going to show you grace, even though I'm not going to try to punish you for what you've done, I still have to make sure you understand that it is okay what you're doing. It's not okay. That is obedience. You have to understand what you're doing is not okay, and there is somebody that is going to hold you accountable, and well, unfortunately, eventually that will be done. So either we, the church, can decide to hold one another accountable today, or we can let people wander off the trail and we're going to allow God to hold them accountable tomorrow. Which one do you want to do? Do we want to teach strict? Do we want to teach improving on the game? Or we really ready to start teaching obedience? And that brings us to an interesting question. When it comes to obedience, what on earth am I supposed to teach? Well, Jesus makes it interesting. He makes it easy. He said, Jesus said to the disciples, disciple making teaching should be focused on the commands he shared with the disciples. Okay? So, what are the commands of Jesus? And here's the thing. If you start going just through the gospel, let's just say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If you just start going through the gospel, you start just trying to pick out the commands of Jesus, it can get very overwhelming. I went out searching, and I found numerous books that have been written on the topic of Jesus and his commands, and I found one book that cited 70 commands from the Gospels. 70? I got 70 things I got to remember and teach straight all at the same time. And you need to remember, this is just the things they wrote down. John chapter 21, verse 25 says Jesus did many other things as well. And if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for books that would be written. So we've only got the stuff that was written down that we know about, but I have a hard enough time just keeping all of that. And then I throw in the fact that Jesus himself said in the Old Testament, well, that stuff comes into play also. So I've got 70 commandments in the Gospel. I've got all those books in the Old Testament that a lot of times I don't understand the details of those and how this works. And to be obedient, I have to teach them all. And I have to be honest with you. I'm a data person. I understand the search the internet. I know how to use search tools, and even with our advanced modern day research tools, learning everything Jesus taught seems impossible. Let alone take what I learned and put it into practice. Think about that for a minute. If I really took everything the Bible unfathomable of how I'm supposed to accomplish this task. The good news is we are not the first people to struggle with the idea of obedience. As a matter of fact, we're very familiar with Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 38. Teacher, talking to Jesus now, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Notice this guy is looking for one. All right, very important. Which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Okay, so the guy asked for one, Jesus gave him two. And I want you to remember the motivation behind this guy in asking this question had absolutely positively nothing to do with he was going to be obedient. They were trying to trap Jesus in a statement to get him to figure out what was supposed to be there. And well, Jesus, he didn't shy away from it. He took this as a teachable moment. And in that teachable moment, maybe you did not know this, Jesus stepped back into the Old Testament. Jesus didn't make these two statements up. He stepped back into the Old Testament. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, and Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. And so doing, he summarized the entire Old Testament, all of the law. He took everything. He took the Ten Commandments. He took everything. He even said, by the way, the prophets, all that comes through. And if you can just keep these two, you got all the rest. Okay, I can breathe now, right? I can count to two, 1, 2. So now I only got two to keep. I don't have to worry about finding 70 doctors. I don't have to worry. I just have to keep two. However, you need to understand, while he was blending these two together, he laid a simple foundation for what it means to be obedient and to be an obedient, Christ-following disciple. And that's what I want to point out this morning. Because the first thing he says you have to do is you have to make your relationship with God the priority of your life. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5 reads, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Now this is one of those cases that order is irrelevant. You cannot try to keep part 2, love your neighbor as yourself, until you keep part 1. That's important. Because a lot of times we get into the mode of how I'm supposed to be a good Christ follower. I'm supposed to go do nice things for people that sit in my life. Understand, that's okay, but if you're truly trying to be obedient, number 1 on the list was guess what? You have to make God's relationship a priority. And for that, you have to remember the number 1 command for Jesus in all of the gospel was 2 words. Follow me. Everywhere he went, he found somebody. He said, hey, follow me. To the rich young ruler that came to him, follow me. To the 12 disciples, follow me. To all the people that said, I want you to follow me. Take up your cross daily and follow me. Follow me. That is what Jesus is trying to get us to do. Now, this does not mean that we need to quit our jobs and all move to an island just so we can be exclusive followers of Jesus. Matter of fact, if we move to an island, then guess what? I would violate law number 2 because then I have nobody to be nice to, right? So we need to understand that we need to follow. But when Jesus made the statement, he did say strength, mind, heart, and soul. That's Matthew. Did you notice something? He added something to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. He added mind. If you go back and read Deuteronomy, he didn't say anything about your mind. When Moses wrote it, when Jesus quoted it, he said, it's also about what you are thinking. Now, when Jesus said those 4 parts, you've got all humanity rolled together. You've got your physical, you've got your intellectual, you've got your emotional, you've got your spiritual. That's the 4 parts. Jesus put them all back together. I've got to figure out how to make you a priority. Because obedience is not in the moment a feeling, but it is a thought out plan. So let me ask you a question. Have you got a plan for making God a priority in your life today? I can't see what can happen. We'll make this up as we go. That's not thinking about it. That's allowing yourself to react to it. So Jesus seems to think that this idea of thinking about it is important. I do not obey because I want to be spiritual, but because I have decided I want this relationship. I want this relationship with God more than anything else in my life. I want this relationship to be exactly what I want it to be. And Jesus said, hey, all or everything I've got. He wants every part of me. He wants everything that I can offer him. It's an old action saying Jesus does not want to be part of your life. He must be the priority of your life, or you have no life in him. Jesus can't be a Sunday morning Jesus, and then I go home. Jesus can't be this little piece of the puzzle that I finally got put in place, and that's the last piece, and now my life is complete. You understand the way Jesus views things is we're supposed to be fitting the rest of our life into him. And what doesn't fit into him, I get rid of. That makes this a whole lot harder. You see, in our teaching, it's to reflect the words that were spoken in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Here's the thing about this verse. When I start speaking, looking at this verse, I focus a lot on the back part of that verse. All these things will be added to me. What's in it for me? What do I get? But we've got the order wrong. Seek ye first. Don't worry about the things you're going to get. You just worry about getting your focus on Jesus. You just worry about seeking God first in your life. And the amazing thing happens is when you do that, the other part starts to take care of itself. Share your relationship with your neighbors so that they may follow you. This is what it says in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Think about it for a moment. Ponder. How many of Jesus' teachings had to do with human interaction? Go ahead, put them in your mind. How many of the things Jesus taught actually had to do with human interaction? Well, all of those commands around forgiveness and mercy tell us how to live and love our neighbor. It means I'm supposed to love my neighbor in such a way that I am looking for ways to forgive. I am looking for ways to show mercy. I am looking for those opportunities to show that I have mastered the idea of putting God as a priority in my life, because you know what? You're important to me. In fact, Jesus goes so far as to say, even to my enemies, those people I don't get along. You have heard that it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I, this is Jesus, we can tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is backwards from what we're doing. Don't believe me? Just go out to the next political rally that people are having. We're no longer concerned with loving our neighbor. We're concerned in what's good for me, my beliefs, what I want, what's important to me. And if you don't agree with me, we put a barrier between us. That's not what Jesus is preaching. Jesus is preaching that if you're going to obey the command, you absolutely, positively have to be willing to love your neighbor. Even to the point that you love them so much that you give them the best love that you can give them, and that is to share your faith. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's a hard one, but that's loving your neighbor. So, what we're supposed to learn is let's put priority on God, love my neighbor as myself. But there's a more interesting question here. Who are we supposed to teach this Now, I'm going to give you an answer, and then I want to give you your attention so I can explain this answer. Everybody who has declared themselves a follower of Christ, please do not miss this. Like we do commands, Jesus had a priority order to this, and you can't do one without the other. You're not supposed to try to teach obedience to people that don't have a relationship with Christ. What? Getting people that have no relationship with Christ to come to church is not a win. Okay? The obedience factor are for those that are followers of Christ. You see, sometimes we put this right in the wrong order. We expect obedience to Jesus' command from any. We cannot expect obedience to anybody's command from anybody that does not claim to know the Lord. Think about that. Why would anybody make a priority in coming to church if they have no belief in the person from whom formed the church? Why would that work? See, a lot of times we're so busy trying to get people to obey, we absolutely probably forget that, you know what? Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 2:14 is useless. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. I cannot teach somebody to obey the Bible, to obey the commands of Jesus, until they first have a relationship with Jesus. You absolutely positively do not learn how to be a follower by learning to follow under your own power. I'll just learn enough rules and regulations to make me look the part. That's not how this works. So that means I got a really distinct line here. When I meet somebody that doesn't have a relationship with God, do I teach them obedience? No, I teach them Jesus. I teach them introduced to Jesus. Now, once they accept that they claim to be a follower, yes. Now, all the obedience stuff comes with it. This is important that we know this, because this is how disciples are made. Again, you do not become a follower by learning to follow under your own power and authority. If you're trying to learn how to be a follower by learning enough Scripture, you just can't do it. Here's the thing, if you're determined to teach obedience without acceptance, then we are destined to teach religion, not relationship. We're going to teach people how to obey. We're never actually going to teach them how to follow. If we are unwilling to provide application over just information, we're going to continue to mislead and misdirect. We're just going to give people more and more information, more rules to follow, more things to do, and we're never going to get them to understand what it means to actually be a follower. If we're overlooking the idea of obedience to accountability, then we will continue to just try to improve the game and teach some tricks. But you know what? You're never going to get them to obey. Because obedience begins with a relationship with Christ. And then we bring the other stuff in. You've got to put it in the right order. Because in the end, the disciples are not born, and they are not produced. They are made. We have no greater mission in our church than to go and make disciples by knowing, baptizing, and teaching. So this poor little story has been bumped all over this particular series. I'm going to close the series. I'm going to share a very personal moment in my life. I wrote this down because I didn't want to ramble through it, because I can get very long-winded in the story. So I'm going to try to keep it where it needs to be. I shared this with Leah last week after the service, because she was so relieved when she had finished telling her story. She was filming her word. It was summer VBS, and I was 13 years old. I had been voluntold, because that's the way it works in my church, that I would be helping in one of the VBS classes. As part of my duties, I had to teach one lesson. I was given the lesson first. I taught my lesson, and when it was done, I decided to give an invitation. I had everybody bow their heads. I made a few statements about becoming a Christian. Then I asked if there was anybody that would like to accept Christ. I had no idea why I made this decision. This was not something that was planned. But I decided to do it. And to my horror, good natured 13-year-old boy would do, I panicked. And I ran to find my youth minister. After all, this is his department, right? So I go and I find him and I tell him what I've done. And he looks at me with that wry smile that he always had. He says, "What next?" It's obvious he's not going to bail me out at this point. So what next happened was me and this little boy and the youth minister went to a room. And he basically left me to fumble through John 3:16, try to explain the plan of salvation, what it means to be a follower. And at the end of the whole mess, I actually did get the little boy to say a prayer. And when he was done, Rich asked the little boy if he could go with him to talk to his parents about his decision. The little boy with a great big smile thanked me, and he left. And I about passed out in the room where I was sitting. However, in a few minutes, Rich came back, and he looked at me and said, "Good job. But I bet next time you'll be more ready." And I remember thinking, next time? You got to be kidding me. I am never doing this again in my entire life. There will be no next time. But there was a next. And the next. And the next. Keep in mind, I've never had one of those Billy Graham moments where hundreds of people came forward and said, "I want to accept Jesus," because if that happened, I would again probably pass out when I go to bed. No idea what I would do. And I shared this story with you not because I want to brag and say, "Look, that's what I did." Because in all of this, I have a very real question. Did I make the disciple that day? Did I? I mean, I said all the right words, and I got him to pray a prayer, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen him since this day. Did I make the disciple that day? I wonder about this. And you have to wonder for yourself a lot of times, have I been made a disciple? But you know what? I often question whether or not I made a disciple that day. I know somebody that did. His name was Rich Will. He was the youth minister that allowed a 13-year-old boy to sit down and share the gospel with somebody else, thus teaching them disciple making is all about disciple making. Now, I still have my questions. And one day, me and this little boy are going to be sitting in heaven, and we're going to have a really good laugh about the day that I gave an invitation with no clue how to make a disciple. And I hope that's the case. I'm hoping I'm the deep guilty unit. I just had that one moment, I did what I had to do, the next person will come along. But today I want you to consider this. Have you ever thought about all the people that have come through your life? How many disciples have you made? How many people have you taken the time to pour your life into? How many times have you let somebody walk